Hey guys, welcome back to the Spates Waterlad podcast. Here we are. It is the Dance in France final preview show. Two of the most dominant teams in the history of the sports face off on the biggest stage. It is the perfect way to finish what has been an incredible Rugby World Cup. And if you are watching this on YouTube, no, I have not had a stroke. I'm straight back from the dentist, so excuse the sloppy face. But before we look ahead, we have to look back to the weekend which has just happened. It didn't quite live up to the quarterfinals, which we had the week before, where we had four of the most incredible games of footy, but it still did have plenty of drama that we always get from this great game. And again, we are lucky to be joined by two of the great rugby analysts in the game, two of the best in the world. We've got Searley from Searley Talks Sport and Jacob, the Jacob Atkins, who, Jacob, you look like you've had about 1,000 spates over there, mate. What's going on?
Yeah, I'm back in London, Jim. I flew back to be with my countrymen and women after last weekend's emotionally draining performance, shall we say. Now I'm back in London, a few quiet ones this evening, and looking forward to chatting with you lads across the globe.
Mate, how have the country handled it? I'm a couple of episodes into this David Beckham doco, and I can't believe some of the abuse the public and the media give their national side.
Yeah, do you know what? I think it's actually been received pretty well. But my old man and my younger brother were at the game, and my dad came to pick me up from the airport when I came back into London on Monday, and I was expecting him straight away to just be like, "Oh, it's a fucking disgrace. We should have won." Blah, blah. But I think basically the opinion has been that regardless of what the result was, we weren't going to win this World Cup, right? If we'd got over the line against South Africa, I think everyone was well aware that unless it was blowing a gale force and pissing down sideways rain, we weren't going to beat the All Blacks next week as well. So making the final wasn't really the be all and end all. People were just happy that there was a performance put out that everyone could see to kind of claw some respect back and kind of maybe silence some of the people that have said, "Oh, you don't deserve to be there." Like, you can say what you want, and England did have an easy draw, etc. And it has been a pretty cushy World Cup for England and Argentina. But England showed at the weekend that they are a team that, if a few things were done differently, maybe could be a serious semi-final team. Whereas Argentina, I think, didn't show that at all. So I think generally the opinion over here has been people have been pretty happy with it, pretty proud of the lads. Like, and just not too focused on the result, more focused on, like, we thought we were going to have 25-30 on us. So to go down by a late kick, I think everyone's just seeing it for what it is, pretty calm heads. We weren't expected to win this World Cup anyway, you know?
Fair enough, because, massive shout out to England for the effort they put in. Like, they looked in control of that game for a majority of it. So, I think they can leave that World Cup with their heads held high. And obviously, looking forward to this weekend, though. The All Blacks are at the big dance. Searley, you called this from the start. You said Sir Ian Foster would be knighted at the end of this Rugby World Cup. You obviously thought France would be here, but South Africa, mate, you're the oracle. You've always called these performances from a long way out.
Yeah, I guess that 1 point loss from France probably tripped up the ultimate prediction there, and I probably would have gone viral. I'd probably be on Sky Sports right now speaking about how I can just see the future. But hey, it is what it is. And like you said in the intro, I think the Southern Hemisphere fans anyway get the final that we were after, right? I thought, like, full credit to England, and like they had a game plan that a lot of people don't like, especially over this side of the world, but they dragged South Africa into a shit fight, which was the plan going in, and they almost pulled it off. And then it reminded me of like that 2019 semi in a way where all of a sudden England could have won that game and you'd just be like, what did I just watch? But full credit to them. Like, they were so close to pulling it off. So yeah, much like what Snakey said, like, I tip my hat off to England. I think making the semi for them was a big win. But I do think we got the final that we're after.
Yeah, 100%. Looking forward to this week. It's going to be huge. But we will talk about that All Black Argentina game. Obviously, 30 points was sort of predicted by majority of us. It was, in fact, 38. 44-6 was the final score. What do you make of the game, Searley, in a whole?
Yeah, I think as New Zealand fans or like the public, we've been a bit harsh this week. Like I see people being like, "Oh, that was a shit semi-final, rah rah
Yeah.
rah,"
I
and
can't
like,
win, eh?
no, you can't win because the All Blacks played unreal. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
Argentina probably weren't semi-final worthy, and that Ireland game was obviously probably more deserved to be the semi-final. And watching the game, I felt sorry for Ireland, right? Like they're back at home watching that one, just being like, man, we could have made history and made a semi-final and made much more of a contest of this. But at the same time, you got to tip your hat to the All Blacks. Like they were playing so fast. There's so many times there where they get to fourth or fifth phase and like Aaron Smith or like the ruck cleaners aren't even there because they're just so far ahead of themselves. Like they were truly dominant. I thought Argentina in the first 10 minutes played with a lot of passion, a lot of pride. They certainly don't muck around at the contact areas, so I'm sure there would have still been some sore bodies, but they reminded me so much of rugby league, and like we know with David Kidwell there, but they were winding up from about 10 metres behind the advantage line, steaming in, and then like seventh or eighth phase, once they got into our red zone, they just put through like a pointless little grubber, like it was the last tackle, and they were forced to do that. So I was a bit confused by it as well, but yeah, obviously the All Blacks ticked every box that was needed. I think we said last week, like the ultimate result would be 50 minutes, the game's done, you can pull off some bodies, get a bit of rest in. Well, we finished the game with 14, a lot's been made of that, but it was the final 3 minutes, like people saying that's a move of arrogance, like pull your head in, but yeah, I think it was literally the perfect outcome for us. I don't think we saw the same mental intensity from the All Blacks, but that's only natural. And in saying that, like I mentioned in the build up to the Ireland game, you could tell the boys were locked in. You get that exact same feeling this week. Like we saw Dalton in the press conference yesterday saying the lads were shedding tears at a team night about the stories of how much the jersey means to them and the leadership group around their last World Cup and stuff. Like I have a feeling, man, there's an onslaught coming, but I'm sure we'll get to that soon. But yeah, impressive. And then Will Jordan should have had 4. Richie Mo show and go, the trademark. Probably the worst time to pull it out. As first fives ourselves, though, I don't know about you guys, 100% would have done the same thing and tried to dot down for a famous meaty. But yeah, Will makes history, right? Like he ties history. He's about to become, hopefully this week, the most prolific try scorer in World Cup history. So yeah, it kind of ticked every box, didn't it, in a quick summary?
Yeah, mate. What quick summary, mate. You've nailed everything. But you're right, Will Jordan. I was probably one of the few who was actually quite happy Richie Mo went the show and go because I triple captain Mark Taller and Will Jordan was actually on fire in that game.
Yeah.
And I should never have doubted the man's ability to find the white line because he is incredible. But you also talked about David Kidwell and their D and it being quite league-esque. It also looked like their wingers were defending like that because, man, there was some easy space wide. Like it was pretty easy often for those Will's tries. Just an easy long ball, no one even in sight, like just jamming hard like they do in league. So, but really predictable pictures. So, we did sort of expect Argentina to struggle on the edge, hence why we predicted the score, but it was all too easy. But one thing I did really enjoy was the All Blacks edge D. Like I know I've had a lot of questions on that throughout the World Cup and the podcast, but I was really liking how hard some of their backs were coming when they got to numbers on. Geordie Barrett in particular, far out. As soon as they got man on, he was flying out, putting all sorts of pressure on. Anton Leonard-Brown's done it as well, coming off the bench. As soon as their numbers on, they're really coming with some heat and putting some aggressive tackles in, which is awesome to see. And Geordie's performance was incredible in that game. His intent in some of those collisions and carries and his skill set, mate, he is world-class, best 12 in the world, in my opinion, for sure. What did you make of the game, Snake? Jeez, we've spoken a long time without getting to you.
Oh, boys, I tell you what, we need to start planning this show and talking about what each other are going to talk about on our notes before we get in. Because, Jimmy, I was going to cue you up perfectly to say that Fozzie and the lads have obviously been listening to the show, listening to you moan about the D all week, because I thought the exact same. I thought the Edge D looked way, way better this week, and that gets me fired up for South Africa this weekend. I think, like we said, you both touched on it, we predicted that it would be probably New Zealand in the area of 30 points. But I certainly didn't predict it would be this easy. I was thinking 30 points in terms of maybe the ABs go 10, 15 up into the last 20. Argentina have to stick or twist. They go for it, and then the ABs run away with it with the better bench strength, the better fitness levels, etc. But Jesus, they were absolutely cruising, weren't they? And the scariest thing for me was Argentina started the game well, exactly like Searley said. They had heaps of possession, they had heaps of territory, they kept the ball for long periods of time. But I never at any point thought that they were going to score. And then the All Blacks turned the ball over, penalty, kick to the corner, 3 phases advantage, score in the corner.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere. And that must absolutely just kill all your morale on Argentina's side of the ball. Second try, they go to the exact same thing. Heaps of territory, heaps of possession. I said to you lads on the chat, they were like a loaded gun without a trigger. Like they had all the territory, all the possession, and they just never looked like firing any shots. And then New Zealand turned the ball over, shift. Rico Ioane goes 80 metres, 3 phases, and then Geordie scores in the corner. And then you're 10 minutes, you fought, or they kicked a goal, didn't they, and they missed. So you're basically 10 points down, and you've been the better team with 80+% territory in possession. And I think that just showed that, like, Searley, you're right, like the All Blacks didn't seem to have the same mental intensity that they brought to the Ireland game, but almost like, how could they? Like they weren't.
Didn't need to.
They didn't need to. They had 3 possessions in the first 12 minutes and scored 3 tries, basically. If you're not considering exits as possessions, and that for me was like, fuck, that's so impressive, lads. Like, it's easy to be intense and accurate when it's a back and forth game and you're going at each other, but when you don't see the ball for 5 minutes, so then just snap into attack, shift and execute. Like, it looked like training ground stuff, Jim. It looked like training shape that you run on a Thursday when you're just trying to get the confidence up for the boys and move them around. And I was really, really impressed by this game, man. I was really, really impressed. They made it look easy.
They did. They definitely did. And anyone who's blaming Angus Gardner for this result is absolutely laughable. Like, Argentina obviously missed 51 tackles in the game. So, like, that's hard to know whether that's All Blacks being incredibly good at beating defenders or putting them under all sorts of pressure or just some really average D. So that's going to be interesting to see how that goes this weekend against South Africa, who obviously defend a lot heavier. But Mark Tlair, shout out to Mark Tlair, 14 tackle breaks. That guy has got to be the slipperiest man in the world. Like, some of those carries, like, just around the rack, just getting really busy and just beating 5 or 6 forwards before setting up a try is just incredible stuff. Snakey, you look like you want to say something there.
Yeah, mate, they basically chuck him in as an extra Lucy in the red zone, don't they, and run 3 pods of 3. So they play with him as like a free number 8. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
That passage you're talking about was outrageous. In international rugby against a physical pack, to pick the ball off shoulder off 9 and get through 4 tackles from a standing start.
Yeah.
Jeez. Must have been a good night last week because he was flying.
I know they drug tested Will Jordan after the game, but I reckon they need to get like a skin sample from Mark Tlair, because I reckon he's just baby oiled within an inch of his life, and that's got to be illegal, or like Vaseline or something, because no one can get a hold of him. They got the wrong.
There's no rules on that yet. You can wear as much Vaseline as you want. It's probably underutilized. More players should do it.
Crazy stuff.
But one thing we have got, like, obviously there's been a few complaints about the draw and how it's all sort of worked out. But what we have got from the finals football in this Rugby World Cup is we've had 5 games out of the 6 go right down to the very last play. So whether it was right or wrong, the draw, what we have got is like 5 incredibly close, intense games of footy where you haven't known the winner right until the end. That was the only real blowout of the finals footy. So whether you say it was the right draw or not, it has given us a pretty good outcome, especially last week in the quarterfinals. That was incredible. And another game which was right down to the wire, which we spoke about, is England versus South Africa. And what a game. We've spoken about a little bit in the intro, but what a game that was. What do you make of it, Snake?
Yeah, it was a good game, certainly in terms of the the context and the pressure and stuff. Not sure it was a great one for the neutrals or lads like ourselves who love heads up, fast code, boys playing the space. But hey, boys, this was the kind of game my dad fucking loves. But he's a 50-year-old Englishman who's watched the Premiership for his whole life. So, look, I think from England's point of view, and I guess we're going to touch on South Africa a lot when we look at the preview for the final. So I'll kind of have my say on England. I think, in terms of the result and the performance, and I've kind of, whenever I've got into England, I've been careful to say the lads on the field have done a fucking good job here. And this is a really good result and performance in the context of the whole World Cup. I think the lads that went on the field, went out there, they did fantastic against a very, very good Springbok team, and they essentially beat the Springboks the way that the Springboks beat France. So, fucking impressive job. Hats off to everyone involved on the pitch for England. I think the tactics were very, very clear and simple, and incredibly repetitive. Basically, England's game plan was receive the ball, either carry and set up a contestable box kick or go straight to a contestable kick, send the winger after the kick. Then there's two decisions. If the winger can get there and slap the ball back, he goes for the slap back, and they've obviously organised 3 players to connect in behind the slap back to get on any loose balls from that contest. If you can't get the slap back, land the collision, hit and chase, and then the 3 players go and fire that ruck as hard as they can, make an absolute shit fight of it, win the ball back or win a penalty, and then punch a grubber into the corner and basically make South Africa try and play out from their own goal line and keep that on a repeat until you win a pen, kick a goal, South Africa get a knock on, etc. And it was fucking successful. You can't deny it was successful. And look, I'm not an idiot. I understand that the conditions played a fucking massive part in this game. If this is a game on at 5 o'clock on a dry French afternoon, does this game plan work for England? Probably not. But tactically, they were perfectly set up. And like I was just flicking through the stats, like England 41 kicks to South Africa's 29. So it really shows that both teams kick the lead off the thing. 11 of those kicks regathered, 961 kick meters for England. So that is that's an absolute kickathon. That is relentless commitment to the game plan. But the one that made me laugh was the running meters ball in hand. So England 236 running meters ball in hand. South Africa 190 meters ball in hand. Right, compare that to the other semi-final. Argentina 522, New Zealand 621. So that's a third of the running meters. And you can say, the All Blacks bashed Argentina up. Argentina's still part of 530 run meters. So the conditions played a part, but this was a rough game to watch. I think South Africa were really poor. They didn't adjust well. They didn't adapt well. I think the coaching team were proactive, which is good to see. You don't often see it in rugby, like coaches in the first half being like, fuck, we're tactically not set up right for this game. We have to make changes. I think it's a brave call and it's a tough call on Lebok and Willemse to pull them off pretty early. But the moment that they sat down, saw the conditions, saw how the game was unfolding, I think Rassie had to get Pollard on as quick as possible. He had to get Leroux on at the back to try and do something to reorganise the backfield and change the nature of the game. So they reacted well, and ultimately, lads, they probably deserved to lose the game on the day. England probably did deserve to go through, but sign of great teams, and you win games that you're not supposed to win. You win games that you've been outplayed in, and in the context of the World Cup, you can't argue that South Africa shouldn't be in this final at all. So, hats off to them, hats off to Rassie, and I think in a strange way, it is impressive that South Africa can just grind these wins out, isn't it?
Yeah, geez, good summary, Snake, and your swear count's gone up massively after a few diesels. It's good to see. But you did mention Rassie and his subbing, and it's such an interesting one, eh? Like, it looked like it was quite emotional at the time when Lebok shanked one of his cross kicks. There was a next player immediately subbed off. Same with Kobus Reinek when he shanked one of his box kicks. Next phase, he was subbed off as well. But obviously with the conditions, that game was always set up for Pollard. So it's almost like, why didn't they even swap it before kickoff? It was always set up for Pollard. Lebok did his best. He kicked his goal. He was doing all right. He wasn't doing anything too bad other than a couple of shanks. But the game was always set up for Pollard. And you've got two contrasting tens like they do, one very attacking, one very sound. It almost makes sense for Rassie to go into a game not knowing which one he's going to pick and see what the conditions are going to be and play the one that's going to suit, because so contrasting, which you don't often get in teams. You wonder why teams wouldn't do that more, but not often you'd have such contrasting styles as your 10, because you'd want a consistent sort of style as your team shape. So interesting one, though. What do you make of it, Searley? You're obviously a big scrum expert too, so you would be interested to get your thoughts on how you felt the scrum changed the game.
Yeah, well, like you said, I'm the poor man's Mike Cron, so I love a good scrum. And that All Blacks game, that was the most disappointing aspect for me. There wasn't a scrum for the first 29 minutes. That's what I park up on the couch on my mornings to watch. So, yeah, this one was definitely an interesting game. For the first 70 minutes, she was a pretty tough watch. And to be honest, if it wasn't a Rugby World Cup semi-final, I probably would have turned it off and not watched on from there. But the last 10 minutes was unreal just because of the drama and what was at stake. But Snakey mentioned before the kicking, I think England kicked away 93% of their possession. So whenever they had the ball...
That's a great stat.
that was the go-to option, and they spent 72 seconds in South Africa's 22 across the game and almost won the game. So unless I've been stitched up with those stats from a pretty reliable source, then that's crazy. Like, the fact you can do that and lose a game by 1 point is almost a credit in itself.
Yeah.
You mentioned Lebok before. If that was me getting pulled after halftime, I'm in the sheds on the cold ones, and either way, I'm having an absolute day of things. I'd be furious, throwing the strap and tape, the works. But like you said, it's so interesting, right? Like, we saw Lebok start against France, great conditions first half. What a game of rugby that was to watch them play. Then in this game, completely different contrast. So you do, like Snaky said, and like what you said, Jimmy, you got to tip your hat to the Springboks, their ability to just adapt to however the game is being played and still get the win, regardless of the style they have to play, is incredibly impressive. I do wonder if they're starting to fatigue a little. Like, they had Ireland, they had Scotland, they had Tonga, who they put away by 30 points, but man, there were some big shots going in there. And then France and England, like, that's a tough 6 weeks on the body, and it's been the same 23 really throughout all of those games. Like, they have this amazing bench and stuff, but there hasn't been a lot of movement around the squads, whereas the All Blacks have been able to like restrict time on legs so much more. So I do wonder if that'll play a factor this week. But yeah, full credit to South Africa. It wasn't pretty for a neutral fan. But at the same time, like I said at the start, I'm just glad they got it done. Almost be more nervous taking on England in a final for some reason, just because like I feel like they just drag you into it, and like our kicking game hasn't always been our biggest strong point throughout this All Blacks cycle over the last kind of 18 months. So I feel better knowing that it's South Africa and that they'll probably try play some footy with us.
Yeah, I'm definitely more nervous playing South Africa than I would have been playing England. I thought if we played England, I thought it could have been a big score, especially on a dry night. But South Africa, I am relatively nervous about. I think this one's going to go right down to the wire. But
don't get me wrong, I'm nervous. I feel like if we lose to South Africa, we'll be allowed to play our style still, where I feel like if we took on an England and tried to play force back with them, we'd just get strangled, but maybe not.
Nah, fair enough. And that is why you two are the two best analysts in the game. They're great rundowns of two great semi-finals. But one thing that we haven't really spoken about, which was always a big concern going into this Rugby World Cup, was the high shots and how many red cards and yellow cards there was going to be when we got into the finals footy. But there's actually been hardly any. I can't actually remember one high shot in the quarterfinals and semi-finals. I could be wrong there. There's been a couple of cards, but they've been for slap downs and a few cynical things, but nothing high shot. So either full credit to all the players who have adjusted to the rules really quickly and no head on shoulder, or maybe the TMO's not been as inclusive as he was at the start, intrusive as he was at the start. So I'm not sure. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting. Like, we've had 5 cards throughout this tournament, but not a lot of them have been for high shots, whereas South Africa, a team so known for like aggression and big bodies, they've only had the one throughout the whole tournament. So like teams have been really well disciplined, and I think like as a result, the refs haven't had to intervene too much. It's almost been more the TMOs, which is why I don't understand like why the refs are copping it so much. But that's a different subject. But I do think like discipline, especially in this final, is going to be massive. But it was good to see on the weekend, like clearly there's been talk about it amongst these teams. They've adjusted, and I think the refs have been quite open in like their dialogue as well to teams throughout the week around what they're looking for. So I think the refereeing's been good, man. Like they've only made calls that they've had to make.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking of referees, obviously we spoke about it last week, who we thought would be given the final, and it is of course Wayne Barnes, who in my opinion, has been the best referee for a long time. And I think he's the perfect man for the job, and I think he'll do a great job. And hopefully gets through the game with no controversial calls, which is impossible, but hopefully the result's sort of conclusive enough that the referee doesn't come into play, because like we always say, if you look through the eyes of one team, there's probably going to be 30 sort of calls that could have gone against you. So if the game's pretty conclusive, then no one will need to be going down those routes to find every little mistake or missed call he could have done. But let's get to the final. We've spoken about it. Huge game, massive. What a way to finish this Rugby World Cup. Snaky, who are you picking? I know at the start of the year you said France and Ireland were the two clear dominant teams in World Rugby. None of them are in the final, so you're going to have to make this one up.
Up the
I
south.
know, lads. I know it's a sad week, man. Just under 2 months of World Cup rugby, and finally the last Northern Hemisphere team's gone. This was supposed to be our year, boys. This was supposed to be our year in Europe, but same old faces. The race for 4 championships. The two old horses going at it. What do I think for the final? Honestly, lads, the head says All Blacks, the heart says All Blacks. But Rassie says South Africa are going to win, and you boys know I love Rassie. I can't go against him. Boys, I'm hoping for an All Blacks win. You boys know how bad I want that black passport and to be accepted as one of your own. But I just think maybe this is some kind of emotional scarring I've not addressed from the 2019 World Cup final. I just think these South Africa lads, when they decide that they're doing it for South Africa, and you've got people shouting at Pollard as he's lining goals up for South Africa, I just think they're a team set up to win in the big dance. Like I said, I really hope the All Blacks do it. I really don't want South Africa to win, but I assumed you boys were going to go ABs as well, so I was hoping to give you something to disagree with.
Yeah, no, I like that. And obviously, Searley, you've been calling All Blacks from the start. You never sort of lost hope, even when they lost to France first round. But you obviously haven't changed here. Why are the All Blacks going to win, in your opinion?
Yeah, I'm backing the boys to get it done. I think the improvements we've made throughout this tournament have just been massive. And this is a side now that is hitting their straps. They're playing their best footy. We've got everyone available, healthy, ready to go. And I just feel like we're peaking at the right time, whereas some of that fatigue in that South African game might be slipping in. Obviously, it's a World Cup final, so they're going to be up for it. But I think it's just that effect of being able to rotate the squad, have a slightly easier run in, but also really create this identity amongst this team. We know what we're going to get from the All Blacks now, and that we've seen it develop throughout this tournament. So yeah, I just feel really confident. I think it all comes down to the start. I think whoever's winning at that 20-25 minute mark will win this game. We've played South Africa twice this year. Whoever was winning at that point went on to win the game. We played them at Mount Smart. We're up 17-0 early, game over. Then we played them at Twickenham, got dominated early, game over. So I think if we can be ahead of them by 10, 15 points, they're going to have to play expensive footy then and chance their arm, and I think that falls into the All Blacks trap. I think if it's a 3-point differential heading into the last 10 minutes, then I'll be really nervous, but I think we've got the weapons to take them on. Our set pieces come on so far. I mentioned that Twickenham game, no Geordie, no Frizzell then, so I think you can cancel that out because both of those two make a massive difference. So yeah, for me, it's all around the fast start. I think kicking game's going to be huge. High ball diffusal, but I trust Talia, I trust Jordan, I trust Barrett, and then Richie Mo'unga's been dropping back there and doing an amazing job, and I think our transition attack off the back of that is outstanding. And I just like what I've seen from the All Blacks, our set-piece attack off lineouts. Again, we saw them target that tail of that lineout against Argentina for Will Jordan's try off that chip and chase. And that came around the same time of that game. They've clearly identified a fatigue level around the 60-minute mark to attack that tail. I don't see why they won't do the same against South Africa. There's just so many aspects that are coming into it for me. The one thing I am worried about is our kickoff exits. I don't know why, but at the moment, I thought they were really patchy on the weekend and pretty dusty against Ireland as well. We're kind of in that two minds as to whether to exit straight away or try get to width, then exit, and it can be a bit chaotic. Both times we started those games as well, both nudges would have been lucky to go 10 metres. It was like you were watching 10-year-olds again. So, I don't know. I'm sure they've gone through that and identified it because South Africa will look to target in that area as well, but yeah, bomb squad, I back our bench against them. Our bench is stacked as well. So I truly do think whoever's winning at that 25-minute mark goes on to win the game. So hopefully it's us.
Mate, well, the Oracle has spoken, and there you go. So if you're a live sports punter, 20-minute mark, then double down because Searley has spoken. And
oh, no, mate, here come the
DMs.
Cheers, mate.
But that is really good analysis, and I think the contrasting styles of the two games that we've seen, which are really good lead-up games to this final, obviously the Mount Smart one where All Blacks were able to play at super quick speed. They were playing on top of South Africa, and when they can do that, they're almost impossible to stop. And if they can get that again, then I think All Black victory is a no-brainer. But in contrast, when South Africa can maul set piece, put All Blacks under heaps of pressure, All Blacks discipline lets them down, then South Africa are going to be a really hard team to beat as well. Like you said, that scoreboard pressure builds, very hard to try and catch up to South Africa and overtake them. So, like you say, All Blacks need a big start, and speed of ball is going to be so important. And what we'll see from South Africa, like we've seen throughout the whole World Cup, is any chance they can, they'll be looking to have an injury, water break. The water guys will be coming on. So how Wayne Barnes officiates that, he's going to be under a lot of pressure, and what he's going to do there, whether it's a real injury or whether he's going to just let it play on, because we will see a lot of guys go down. South Africa will no doubt try and slow this game down to as slow as possible. So the All Blacks will be trying to keep the tempo. I wouldn't be surprised if they'll be looking at quick throws, quick taps, just to keep the pace. Because, like you said, I feel like the All Blacks are a lot fresher than South Africa. They've had huge minutes, these South Africans, in some big games. And in the weekend, they did look a little bit tired. Can you be tired in a World Cup final? I'm not sure. Never been in one. But, yeah, it's going to be an interesting contrast of styles. Where do you see it, Snake?
I was just thinking then, actually, your last one, Searley was talking about the exits. I wonder this week if the All Blacks will go long kicks infield, as in not kick the ball out from their own 22.
I think so. Yeah,
keep it alive, right?
I love it when teams basically back their fitness against the bigger team and just say, right, we are not kicking the ball off the park. So whatever you got to do, it stays in field. So whether that's long and on, and look, they'll have to be bang on with the kick chase, because we've spoken about how dangerous South Africa's back three are in broken field. Like, those guys are no mugs. But South Africa's issue comes if that set then gets to 3 minutes, 3 minutes 30, 4 minutes ball in play, and the guys in the back three haven't got the ball anymore. That's when they're going to have those long breaks. I think every time, you're right, every time New Zealand kick the ball off the park, South Africa will potentially bleed 45 seconds to a minute out of the game, walk back to the line out, slow it down as much as they can. So definitely somewhere where the All Blacks can get parity. Searley, man, you talk so well about the All Blacks. You're convincing me otherwise now, making me second guess myself.
Get up. Hey, how bad do you want that passport, son? Come on. Hey, it's a thing I've learned. You just got to go down on your sword. You got to back the country and just go from there.
Nah, smart, mate. Know your audience. Nah, look, boys, I'm looking forward to it for the same reason that I've looked forward to a lot of games in this competition, maybe more so than in other World Cups. It's just a contrast. It's going to be two massively different styles. And I always think, I love the All Blacks Ireland game. That was obviously fantastic, and there was some ridiculous stuff. But there's something about one team trying to play quick, expansive, heads-up rugby, keeping the ball alive, and the other team doing the complete opposite, and just seeing who can get parity in the game. I think if the All Blacks go out to a lead, I'm kind of stealing Searley's point now, but I don't think South Africa is set up to chase a game. So if the All Blacks at any point go 2 scores up, I don't see where does South Africa score 2 tries from chasing a game out of nowhere. But if South Africa get a lead, I do think the All Blacks can stay in touch. It's such a close matchup, isn't it? It's similar to what I said before. Ireland played South Africa in the group stages. They're so evenly matched, but they're so different. It's so difficult to call, lads.
I guess one thing we haven't spoken about is the weather as well. Obviously, it dictated the game with England and South Africa in the weekend, and forecast suggests, I think, 60% is likely to be rain. So odds are it's probably going to be a little bit of rain around. Obviously, the All Blacks handled that wet ball a lot better in the Argentina game, where I think the conditions were obviously a lot worse in that other semi-final, but I do think rain will help South Africa because it will suit their slower game, set piece to set piece. There'll be a few more scrums potentially from handling errors. They'll be going to the line out a lot more, and I think that will suit South Africa. So I'm hoping for a nice dry evening where we can play and see the best style win. But shame they haven't got a roof at the stadium, because that would be ideal. That would keep the atmosphere in too. So, but yeah, I do think that's going to play a part, the conditions. Who are we going for man of the match, boys? Start with you, Searley. Man of the match in the Rugby World Cup final.
Jeepers, man. There's probably 2 names that come to mind straight away, and that's Jordie Barrett and Ardie Savea.
Wow.
So that's probably my back and my forward prediction. But man, without seeing the team, there's rumours that Whitelock's going to start. And they're going to go the Crusaders locking duo with Brodie on the bench. So that's some chat, which I thought is quite interesting because I've loved seeing Whitelock off the bench just to kind of that cool head to really bring it home. Old Guzzler's got a bit more mongrel about him, eh? So I thought they might have started with him, but that appears to be the chat there. So I wouldn't put it past the Sam Whitelock as well, who just loves the game's biggest stage in these finals because he grows another arm and a leg. But yeah, for me, it would probably be Geordie or Artie, just because I think like Geordie's our most influential back. I think we're a completely different side when he's not out there. And then I think Artie's our most inspirational forward in terms of he's like a leader that really vocalizes his emotions and we get a lot of energy off. Obviously, Sam Kane's our skipper and he does an amazing job at it. But I think Artie leads in a different way where he picks up a lot of the young boys and stuff as well. And they kind of go with him. So those would probably be my two picks at this stage.
Two great shouts, and you're right. Like Artie's got highlight packages, plays in him throughout his game. Man, he works hard. He can do it all. He's an incredible player. And Geordie to go back to back, that would be a good sight to see. But I believe Sam Whitelock is starting. The only changes on the bench, a reserve
Nepo,
prop.
I heard. Nepo at prop and Colsey at hooker. So yeah,
I don't think Colsey is.
Oh, there we go.
But that's an interesting one. It'd be good for these teams to name these teams. Like we've spoken about, it's only fitting that we still don't know the teams for the final going into the last preview show of the year. So why change it? And I'm interested to see the South African side too, because what sort of split they go on their bench, that will obviously dictate, and whether Pollard starts or they stick with Lebox. So a shame we can't talk about that stuff, but hopefully by the next Rugby World Cup, we will have the teams announced a lot earlier. So come on, World Rugby, step up there. Who have you gone, Snake? Who would your man of the match in this one be? It's got to be a South African because...
Of course. I think it depends on what kind of game it ends up being. Like you said, the weather is obviously going to have a massive factor. If it's really bad conditions and it gets into that arm wrestle game, it's either going to be Pollard or it's going to be one of the South African front row, I think, realistically. If someone has an absolute field day at scrum time and wins 5 straight arms, then they might get man of the match, or it might be your classic Pollard kicks 5 goals and everyone on TV picks him as the easy pick in a boring game. I think if the opposite happens and it is an expansive open game, then I'd probably be changing my pick to potentially the All Blacks. And Ardy would be the obvious choice there for me, like Searley said, and I think he's one of those guys, there's like 3 or 4 different ways he could win man of the match. He could win man of the match by scoring an unbelievable game-winning try and having 4 or 5 highlight reel clips. But he could also win man of the match for making 27 tackles and putting in the most meters around the park. Like he's got everything in his game, and I think he's been absolutely fantastic this World Cup. And he ticks the leadership box as well that I think you need to win a man of the match in a World Cup final. You need that leadership factor as well, don't you, to be able to lift that in the World Cup final. So those are mine. What do you reckon, Tony?
I am going to go Richie Mo'unga. I feel like he is just made for these big arenas. He is incredible in the moments, and I'm expecting a huge performance from him. And like you say, if the All Blacks are playing with quick ball, high tempo, forwards are going forward, Richie Mo'unga is almost impossible to stop. He's just... speed, footwork, decision-making, skill level is incredible. And like I said, in a big stage like a Rugby World Cup final, there's not another man who I think has that composure to definitely lead the boys and get them across the line. So I'm going him. He's won the Lad Searle medal a couple of times in Super Rugby finals, and now hopefully he can go the hat-trick with a Rugby World Cup man of the match in a final. Mate, he
Just on him, like, you know him well. So, like, obviously it was a rough day for him off the tee, but he's so classy, you expect that he can just shake that off. But what's he like? Does he move on from stuff like that quickly? Like, will he be saying, Geordie, you kick this week, or does he want the tee straight away?
I would imagine he would be wanting the tee, and he will be kicking his goals all this week. So, I'd be pretty confident he'll have no issues off the tee this weekend. Yeah. And even in saying that, like if he is hitting them poorly, he wouldn't be afraid to hand it over to Geordie as well. If Geordie's striking them really well in the warm-up, it's I guess advantage of having a couple of world-class kickers, and especially if Geordie has to take one from long range and he strikes it really well. Both like a really clutch man. Like Geordie isn't phased by the moment ever. So a couple of good options to have up their sleeve. But I'd imagine Richie will be starting, and that's a good point because I need to select kicker for my fantasy rugby team this weekend. Triple kicker or whatever it is. So, it's going to have to be Richie, I'd imagine. So,
yeah, nice.
There we go. And I guess a game no one's really speaking about, the bronze medal match, probably for good reason. It's weird having a 7th-ranked team playing a 5th-ranked team for a 3rd spot. Would have been nice for World Rugby to just call in Ireland and France and just say, hey, guys, it's clearly obvious you guys are the two. Two guys who should be fighting it out for the bronze.
Gets it. That pre-tournament they decided we cocked up the draw, so the loser of these 2 quarterfinals will play for 3rd and 4th if you lose your semi.
It would be a much more interesting game. I'm sure a lot more people would tune into an Ireland versus France game playing for a bronze medal. That would be intense. But, I guess there's not a huge amount of meaning. People question whether it should even be in the draw, but obviously it still sells out usually, still gets a lot of viewers. It's a money-making thing and still something to watch and good for fantasy players as well, because obviously the game will probably be a bit more open. I'd imagine England are going to play a bit of a looser style. I see your mate starting on the wing again, Snakey. Yeah. So it looks like England are going to look to just throw the ball around a little bit more and take the pressure off, hopefully not go straight into a kick fest in a 3rd and 4th playoff.
No. Some really positive selections for England this week. I think I like the whole back 3. They've obviously got Marcus back in at fullback, Henry on one wing, and then Freddie Stewart's kept his spot in the back 3 after an outstanding performance in the week against South Africa. It's 3 young guys. I think Marcus is the oldest guy in that back 3, and he's 24, 25. Yeah. So it's definitely, although that's a back 3, I would be selecting for England. Borthwick and co are definitely looking at this as a future building game as opposed to we need to win the bronze medal here.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of alluded to it before, but I'll double down on it. Like, this game is fucking so pointless, lads. Imagine losing a World Cup semi-final and then you've got to front up for a test match 6 days later. Like, the lads have lost a World Cup semi-final. Let them just go drown their sorrows and bang spates for a week, like, rather than making them front up for another test match. But look, positive selections for me from England. Looks like they're going to play a little bit more. Special shout out from my point of view to Ben Youngs and Courtney Laws. Looks like it's going to be their last, unofficially, I don't know if it's been announced yet, but looks like it's going to be their last game for England. 2 absolute legends of the game in this country, man. Ben Youngs, I think, is the most capped player for England of all time now, and Courtney Laws probably up there with Owen Farrell in the most consistent high performer for England I've seen in my lifetime. So 2 guys that have huge amount of respect from me and everyone in the country. They've been fantastic players for a long time. So it's nice that they get to bow out in a game rather than sort of in a media message in the week. But in terms of selection, I think England get up in this game. I think they've got a better squad. They've had a better tournament. But I'm more interested in just seeing the manner of the performance in this game. Like I said, the result doesn't really matter. I just want to see if England push the boat out there a little bit more and see if we can grow our game forward now. They've obviously identified that they needed to set up basic foundations of how they wanted to play. My concern is that, like I said about the South Africa game, unless the weather was bad, we're not even in that game. So I want to see more from them this week in terms of how they push the game forward.
Fair enough. England by plenty, did you say?
England by 10, 15.
Okay, what are you going, Searley?
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's going to be interesting because I feel like this game means more to Argentina than it does to England. Like, I feel like for them to get 3rd in a Rugby World Cup, like, they would be absolutely fizzing. And straight away after that game, Michael Cheika was like, we're not done. We want to win bronze. Like, this is what we've come for. So it's almost like they knew they weren't going to beat the All Blacks.
Weird thing to aim for.
Well, mate, you're on the podium. Fuck, how good. So, look, you got to find positives in everything, don't you? Apart from blaming the ref, that was pretty much all he said. So it's going to be an interesting one. I'm excited to see this English side play, and it's cool that, like Snakey said, guys like Courtney Laws, legends of English rugby, and guys have been really fun to watch play footy, are going to go out on a high note. Like, I think the 2019, of course, the All Blacks were in it, and I think we towed up like Wales or something in a game that a lot of people said they didn't watch, but I watched it because we were farewelling so many unreal like players from our game. So I think it's like a cool way. There's nothing worse than when you're deciding you're going to hang up the boots and you go out on a loss. Like, even though it's 3rd or 4th, you'd rather go out as a winner and have a bit of fun afterwards. So Yeah, good on England. I think they'll win this one in that kind of 10 to 15 point range. But it will be interesting, like, if they don't rock up with the same mindset. Argentina could well just beat them on passion. But England's the better footy side, so we'll see.
Mate, I agree with everything you've said. Depends what style and who's basically up for it more. But England are the better side. Argentina are lucky to be there. But, a loose game of footy. Guerrero on the wing can have an absolute field day if they're opening it up. So
bit of rugby
hard
league.
to predict.
Bit of rugby league.
Rugby league for sure. Another thing that's come out this weekend is obviously the Rugby World Cup format. Keen to get your ideas. Obviously, it's going to be a shorter pool play, more teams. It obviously means more coaching jobs for us. And it's probably going to mean more blowouts, no real tough matches in the pools of any significance until you get to the playoffs, but then a longer playoff system. So I quite like the idea. I think it's good to have a shorter pool system, give everyone a chance, more teams, obviously grow the game a little bit more. So I'm a fan of it. What are you guys' thoughts? What are your thoughts, Searley?
Yeah, I think they expanded it to 24 to ensure the Wallabies will still qualify for their home World Cup because, things were looking dicey there. So I think Eddie Jones has called in a couple favours. But no, I like you. I like it. I'm surprised they got the shorter pool play over the line with player welfare because obviously there's going to be more games. I miss those games during the week, man. Like this World Cup, I feel like it was so spread out and it's hard for players to back up on short turnarounds. But there used to be nothing better than a Tuesday night just watching some code. That's when you would watch these tier 2 nations play each other because you were just craving some footy and then you'd get to know a bit more about their style of game. So I'm excited to see that back. The biggest thing for me was that the draw is going to be done 18 months out, not 3 years out, which is great stuff. And still 18 months, a lot can happen in 18 months. So even then it's probably a bit far, but compared to what we've been dished up lately, it seems really close. So hopefully that kind of nullifies that quarterfinal situation we had this year. I'm worried about this top 16 because I saw someone did a prediction on who it would be based off the tournament this year, and there's some 80 plus pointers in there, which isn't really the idea of finals footy. But yeah, look, I'm all for it. I think if we're going to become a global game, then 24 is probably the right number. And hopefully sides like Portugal and that just continue to improve and they could rock up and make that round of 16 with some upsets.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned the player welfare. I'm pretty sure because there's only 4 teams in each pool, you'll only have the 3 games. So
gotcha.
I think it will be
so
just
six,
one game a week.
6 pools of 4.
6 pools of 4.
Oh,
so
I was thinking 4 pools of 6, and it was going to be brutal.
Nah. 4 pools of 6 pools of 4. So they're all pretty small pools. It's pretty clear who the top guys of each pool are going to be.
My dyslexia got the better of me. Sorry, boys. Saw it round the wrong way. Sure.
Did you have anything to add on that one, Snake? Or you want to get straight into the World Challenge?
No, I think, I think first and foremost, it's positive that they're trying to do something. I think it's pretty obvious that somewhere there needs to be some kind of change to the global structure to try and make the game more globalized. Obviously the rugby's fantastic in a set amount of countries and we love watching those countries play against each other. But if we're thinking about the sport thriving and developing and having new domestic leagues form and growing across the whole globe, then the only way to do that is to try and open it up to more of these teams and have a World Cup that is closer to the Football World Cup, where you've got teams from all over the world coming, everyone all over the planet is watching, and very, very quickly that then becomes a catalyst for growth of rugby in different countries. I like most of the changes that they've made to the structure of the World Cup. I would be keen for what Searley said, to condense the whole tournament, have midweek games, and let the squads carry bigger squads. I understand there's an issue there with depth in terms of some of the minnow teams. They wouldn't have good enough depth to run a 40-plus player squad. But, man, I'd love to see the All Blacks take, the All Blacks and the other bigger sides take 45 guys to a World Cup and have to run 2 games a week, having a first-string team and a second-string team, especially for pool play, and just churn the tournament through quickly so that you get, World Cup fever. Because I feel like one of the things this World Cup struggled with is the weekends have been awesome, but then just down in the week it kind of dials off, doesn't it? And then it's the weekend games again and then dials off. Whereas I think what's great about the Football World Cup, for example, is you just have a block where it's hectic and every day, like when you're a kid, you come home from school, the game's on, who's on. When you're an adult, it's who's in your multi this week, getting your tenfold multi. And just games every day for a shorter period for me is better than games on the weekend for a really long period. Then it just kind of fizzles out. I do have issues with the Nations League thing that we're going to talk about next. I mean, Jim, if you want to go
100%.
first.
Just on that last point, I do think they could potentially do that when you've got 6 pools. Obviously, you're only playing the team in your pool. You could almost have one each day. So, pool A play on the Tuesday, and then you can still do fantasy rugby as well, as long as all the teams name, because that's the disappointing side of the midweek games. Very hard to structure a fantasy league around it, and that is, the priority for a lot of people these days. I know yours is the multi, but for some of us non-gamblers, it is all about fantasy rugby. So, but we will get to that.
Why not both?
Or both, yeah. But we will get to the World Challenge. That one's obviously been announced. I think it's an awesome idea. I just think they've just missed a trick with it. I just feel like there needed to be some sort of similar competition underneath it, and a definite promotion relegation where teams like Samoa, who, easy to forget, almost beat England a couple of weeks ago, who are now playing for 3rd place in a Rugby World Cup. Samoa are definitely competitive enough to be in these sort of tournaments, and they need to be to help them grow. So we've definitely missed a trick there, and not given these some of these tier 2 nations an opportunity to compete. But I do like it. I do like parts of it. So interested to get your thoughts. So what do you got, Snake? You love this stuff, and you're hammered.
And I'm hammered. My issue is the two different proposed things don't marry up with each other. So you've introduced a World Cup, which is brilliant, more teams, introducing more countries, bigger competition, but then you're not letting those teams play against the top teams in the lead up to the World Cup. So you're going to have a situation where more teams in a tournament aren't at the level of the teams that are already set in the tournament, and we don't want to see 80, 90-point blowouts. And I feel like what they've inherently set up here is a League One where everyone's going to get better and better and better. And then they're going to... How many teams is in the top league? 12? 16? 12? 10? 10.
I think it's 10.
Yeah, so you're going to have 10 teams in this top league who are going to play against each other, play in this super competitive Super League, and then they're going to get stuck in a World Cup with 14 other teams who have just been left to fend for themselves. And I think, again, it's a good idea to try and connect the global game. And as much as we love the history, I do think that we need to try and find a way away from Six Nations Rugby Championships. Those things can still exist, but maybe not on an annual thing. Maybe they're a biannual thing or every 2 years. And but there needs to be some kind of connection between those 10 teams in this Super League comp and then everybody else behind who's going to ultimately have to play in a Rugby World Cup. And whether that's look, I don't know, I don't have the answers, but whether they could have structured it to have a league with 2 pools and then go into a top group and a second group based on some games and run it as a 2-year thing, or whether, like you said, promotion and relegation is a cool idea. Imagine seeing 2 countries play off to try and get into the top league in a having a playoffs to try and get into the top league. And then there's also consequence. If Italy turn up and do what they did to me at this World Cup, then they get binned down. They have to think about what they did for a year.
Yeah.
For me, the 2 ideas don't. Am I articulating it well? Like, two
yeah,
ideas
super
don't
well,
link
mate.
up.
You need a drink
Thanks,
more.
bud.
You're on
Sorry.
fire. What about you, Searley?
No, I basically agree. I was thinking like maybe they run it like the sevens. You know how they have like the tournaments on, but then there's also the second tier tournaments at the same time.
Yeah.
Like they need 2 tiers. They need the promotion relegation. I see they've said 2030 they're bringing that in, but why does that take 6 years to come into play? Like I feel like World Rugby has kind of scratched the surface here. They've announced this tournament in the build up to the biggest weekend on their calendar for the next 4 years and kind of been like, how cool is this? But hoped it would get swept under the rug because everyone's got World Cup fever. Whereas then guys like Lima Sopoaga and stuff, hats off to them. They've just seen it straight away and starting to speak up about it. Like it's unreal for Fiji. They're probably the biggest beneficiary from all of this.
Yeah.
But sides like Samoa and that, they've just been left in the lurch. And it was the perfect opportunity for World Rugby to unleash this unreal like set up where your Portugals and stuff are all playing each other, all these teams that won the hearts from World Cups, but they kind of dropped the ball on it a bit. So it's a bit disappointing. I'd love to see a promotion relegation game straight away. It makes every test match you play throughout the year so much more important too, because you don't want to get relegated. So you're not just going to send your B side over to play some of these tier 2 teams, because I know it's done on points or whatever, and you got to be in the top 10 for that year to make it, and then there's a second tier. Like, I think they could have done it so much better, but for the top nations, it's really good, right? We get to see Ireland, France, we play South Africa, so much more. So the strong are going to get stronger, and the fear is that the weak are going to get weaker, and then those teams that are in the middle ground kind of get sucked down to wherever level they're playing at. So for some nations, you're stoked. For some nations, you're heartbroken. Like, Tonga and Samoa on paper have some of the most exciting squads, but this is going to hurt them massively, right? Like, imagine if they were in this competition now, you'd see so many more top class players be like, I want to play in that and prove my point. And now it's almost like, I don't know, devaluing them. It's a bit shit, but yeah, I don't know. There's pros and cons to everything. And yeah, I just wish they kind of, like Snakey said, if they want to be a global game, you've got to invest in these smaller, like, rugby playing nations, or else the gap is never going to get smaller. And they keep saying that's the goal, is to get a smaller gap. And then they do something like this after announcing that they're adding 4 more teams. It's like, man, what the hell?
It doesn't quite add up. And it does look from the outside to be very driven by money. You've obviously got, they've got to make a business out of it as well. So that, but like you say, if they're going to say that they're going to invest into the game being, a global game and try and build up these other teams, then they have to invest in it. And looking at this competition, they're not. They're looking at making more money, but maybe with that money, they're going to invest heaps of it into the lower nations. So we never quite know what's going on behind the scenes, but you two saving rugby world problems by yourself.
Yeah, I think we've got a gig lined up, Snakey, mate. We've got a gig. And I'll just leave with a parting shot on Eddie Jones. He's lucky, mate. He's lucky to be in there. They're lucky they're in the Rugby Championship. Jeepers.
Well, anyway, lads, we've got one more review to review next week, the final. I'm looking forward to that one. But as always, some of the best analysis you will get right here on What a Lad, Dance with France podcast. So appreciate your time as always. Thanks for staying up so late, Snake. After a night out. Geez, you've done well. Appreciate it.
Hey, anything for you, lads.
Up the ABs.
Jimmy, mate, I reckon we return the favour next week and just send it early doors. Get on Snakey's level. Up the ABs, 13 plus, boys. Get amongst it.